Hey, everybody, and welcome to Media Literacy Week, Day 4, Unit 3 of Navigating Current Events, the First Amendment and the Role of the Free Press. So we start in class by exploring the First Amendment, what it is, what it means, how it helps us. So one thing for everybody that is watching this to consider is take a quick minute and think to yourself, do you know the 5 freedoms that are protected by the First Amendment? Annenberg Media did a survey not long ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago, and found that only 2% of Americans surveyed could list all 5 of the First Amendment freedoms on the spot. And that's okay. Like, you don't need to know all 5 of them off the top of your head unless you're going to be like a lawyer or a judge or maybe a civics and media literacy teacher. Um, but the things that we talk about is, what does the First Amendment protect us from? Well, the purpose of the Bill of Rights is to protect us from government overreach, and there are limitations on our liberties. Right, our liberties are not absolute; they are balanced against the rights of other people in the interest of public good. Our next topic is journalism and journalist organizations that have several different roles. There's the watchdog. The watchdog investigative journalist sort of explores and investigates different things that need to be exposed in society. Editorialists, on the other hand, they write subjectively. They share their opinion about issues, sometimes controversial topics. They're separate entities. Usually, they're on separate floors or even separate buildings in major organizations. Editorialists who share their opinions, they're allowed to do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's on us, the consumer, to recognize whether or not we're reading opinion or news, right? And that's the zoning information. Then finally, the last sort of journalist is us. It's citizen watchdogs who expose issues in society and say this needs to be looked at. We expose it to the police, to the government, to journalist organizations, to report on things. You may or may not have seen something like this. Usually, it's filled out. When it's filled out, you have to pay attention. Somebody created that subjectively. Somebody decided that one organization is on the left, one organization is on the right, one is of high quality, one is of low quality. What I have started doing is giving this blank document to my students and having them place it on their own. We open up some stories from different organizations and we look at the words and the framing of stories, what stories are included, what stories aren't, and then they place it on their own. So just keep that in mind as you see these sorts of things. How are different organizations framed and identified? And then the last thing, I'm sorry, not the last thing. The third topic that we talk about is the free press, and our free press is not as free as we'd like to think it is. Free press is measured on these 4 quantifying factors. Legal protection, for us, we have the First Amendment, so we're pretty good there. Treatment of journalists historically has been good. The last couple of years, not so great. If you look at violence against journalists, it's been happening. There was a shooting at the Capitol Gazette where a number of journalists were murdered a couple of years ago, and just the general disdain for journalists on social media. If you see it, or in person, you can see these videos, or the way journalists were treated in the Capitol or different places. It's not as great as it once was. And then the last one that most people don't really pay attention to or think about is ownership of media. Our media is owned by not very many companies. So, this one chart here shows who owns the big TV networks. And if you go further and look at movie studios and all these other media creators, Disney owns a lot. Like, Disney owns so much. They own, as you can see here, ABC, ESPN. They own Marvel Comics, Lucasfilms. So they're a huge conglomerate. As you can see, CBS, Fox is another company that owns a lot of different news organizations and things like that. And even our local news is not owned locally in the way that we think it is. For example, both Syracuse.com and Cleveland.com are owned by the same national company called Advance Local. They're not necessarily as big as some other national organizations that own local media companies. There's Sinclair, there's Nestar, and other companies. It's not bad. It just is important for us to acknowledge that our local news organizations are not as independent as we like to think they are. And in other smaller, more rural communities, the loss of local newsrooms is a major, major issue in America. So that's important to know. So just the point of this unit is pay attention to and respect the importance of the First Amendment and the free press.